while sharing, I will give, time to time commentaries on that.
King Louis and his family were now in the Tuileries Palace in Paris.
Students, can you all see the video and hear the sound?
Yes. Yes, sir.
Okay, so I'm starting it again.
King Louis and his family were now in the Tuileries Palace in Paris, where for the next couple of years, he watched as the revolutionary government began to strip away his power. And fearing for his safety, he had to stay on their good side. Hey, look who it is. It's my favorite revolutionaries. Yep, I'm your #1 fan. What can I do for you?
Okay, here a question. King Louis XVI was a strong king, very brave, or he was a very weak king?
So weak. Sir, weak.
Correct. He was a very weak king. So when the government of National Assembly was formed, so during that time, very reluctantly, because people started killing all the nobility and all these things. So because of fear, he accorded recognition to the National Assembly, and because of fear, he always acted like, oh, I am such a big supporter of the National Assembly, and you are taking my powers. I'm very happy. So he was just acting that he was happy. So that is being shown here.
Hey, King Louis. So we've made a few decisions. First, all of your friends in the nobility are going to have to pay taxes the same as everyone else. Great idea.
What happened under the National Assembly, that from now on, clergy, nobility, even the king, everyone will have to pay taxes from now on.
I love it. And as a side note, the tax money can no longer pay for all your lavish parties. Great. I hate those parties. They're so awkward. And also, we're taking away your Porsche. Oh, come on! I mean, yay. The king continually found demand after demand being made of him to prove his support for the revolution. On one occasion, a mob would invade the palace and demand he wear the revolutionary bonnet. This is the face of a man who is definitely pretending he wants to wear that bonnet. Now around here, I want to mention that one thing King Louis had a problem with was people constantly raiding his palace. But one thing he didn't have a problem with was raiding noobs. On this video's sponsor, special links and you will to start your journey. Good luck, and I'll see you there. Now where was I? Oh yeah. Seeing the situation rapidly turning against him, the king decided it might be a good idea to leave France and mount a campaign to retake his country from abroad. Luckily for him, he was married to an Austrian, so on the night of June 20th, 1791, the king and his family disguised themselves as servants and attempted to flee to the Austrian Netherlands. The royal carriage made a stop in the town of Varennes, and the postmaster there was like, "Hey guys, what's up? Where are you off to? We are but a collection of inconspicuous servants heading for the border for no particular reason at all." Say, you, the fat one, you look kind of familiar. Aren't you the king? Nope. Let me see your passport. It says here you're King Louis the 16th. Nope, not me. Take him away, boys. The king was promptly returned to Paris.
Okay, so students, here I think everyone of you could understand that because the king was married to the Austrian princess Marie Antoinette, so he was planning to flee away to Austria. वो Austria के अंडर Netherlands था, so वो वहाँ पे भागने की कोशिश कर रहे थे, and they both wore the dress of the servants. ठीक है? So अभी यहाँ पे दिखाया गया कि his passport was checked. It is just a joke. During that time, the kings and queens, they did not ever used to have passports. उनका कोई passport नहीं होता था. Not even of the common citizens. There used to be some identity marks or something, but there were no passports. So he was in the Varennes, and वहाँ से उनको दोबारा पेरिस वापस भेज दिया गया.
But now, the jig was up. His lack of support for the revolution was clear to all, and many considered him a straight-up traitor who tried to abandon his people. As a result, the new constitution of 1791 completely reduced his powers to that of a simple figurehead, a constitutional monarch. However, radicals, such as those in the...
Okay, so students, you all have studied that under the radicals, that is under the Jacobins, under the rule of convention, what happened to King Louis XVI? At last,
He was executed.
Correct. He was executed. Hopefully, everyone else is also following. He was executed. He was executed on some charge. उनके ऊपर कुछ आरोप लगे थे. What was the charge? He was charged of what? It is given. The word is also given.
Treason.
Its meaning. Treason. Correct. What is treason? Treason matlab?
Betrayal of one's country's government.
Betrayal of one's country or one's country's government. That is देशद्रोह. अगर आप अपने देश से या अपने देश की गवर्नमेंट से गद्दारी करते हो, that is treason. So because Louis 16th जो है वो भागने की कोशिश कर रहा था देश से, and he was planning that he will go to Netherlands और वहां पे जाके he will do some planning with other kings and queens and how to stop the revolution. Because of that, King Louis 16th was labeled as a traitor.
Jacobin Club were outraged that the king wasn't to be removed entirely. So a month later, these radicals staged a protest on the Champs.
So now here everyone do listen very carefully. In France during this time, there were two kind of political party members. दो तरह के political party members थे. One were radicals. Radicals कौन है? The Jacobins, they were radicals. Radical meaning they wanted that the king should be killed, monarchy should get end, France should become a republic. Their thinking was this. But और एक group था. Can someone tell me what was the other group known as? One was radical and the other.
Sir, who wanted constitutional monarchy, that National Assembly.
Correct. Very correct. That is moderates. The another group were known as moderates. So moderates wanted to know, we will take all the powers of the king in our hands, but king will remain a nominal head. King जो है वो एक nominal representative head France के बने रहेंगे, just a king. But he will have no power. That was the thinking of the moderates. But radicals like Jacobins wanted, no, the king, we should just throw away the king. So radicals जो हैं वो moderates के खिलाफ, they started protesting against the king, and one day they were doing this kind of protest and they were open fired.
Du Mars, calling for the king's removal. The government of Paris feared an insurrection was mounting, and they sent the military to disperse the crowd. The confrontation escalated and resulted in the Revolutionary National Guard firing on a crowd of revolutionaries. It was a massacre. The incident exposed a deep division within the Brotherhood of the Revolution. On one side, the moderates who wanted to keep the king as a figurehead. On the other, radicals who wanted to see the king deposed and heads roll. In the wake of the massacre, these radicals received a wave of support. And speaking of rolling heads, one form of equality the revolution introduced was equality in execution. This meant no more torturous drawing and quartering, no more inhumane hanging. They wanted all criminals, regardless of economic status, to receive the same penalty.
French Revolution में क्या हुआ? The revolutionaries wanted that whichever people is being killed, be it a king, be it a poor person, be it a rich person, that person should be killed with least amount of pain. सबसे कम पेन में उनको मारा जाना चाहिए. And can you tell me how did they achieve it? With what kind of a device?
Sir, by using
Guillotine.
Guillotine, correct. By using the guillotine or the guillotine. Guillotine में क्या होता था? Within a fraction of seconds, एक second भी शायद नहीं लगता था, और वो the heavy blade used to come down and cut the head off. So they used to consider it quite a painless death compared to other forms of death. Otherwise किस तरह मारते थे लोगों को, घोड़े के साथ बांध दिया, people were tied with a horse, और वो घसीटते 10 माइल ले गए, तो वो इंसान वैसे मर जाएगा. It's very painful. Even in the hanging, for some moments, आपको सांस नहीं आएगा, you will find and you will die. And there are other methods, were there, very cruel methods. So they said that no, a painless kind of death should be given. Like there should be equality even in death. Death में भी equality होना चाहिए. Everyone should be killed in a similar way, and thus the guillotine was formed.
Quick and painless one. Luckily, a man by the name of Dr. Joseph Guillotine had an idea. A heavy blade that falls like thunder. The head flies off.
So what is the name of the person who invented guillotine?
Dr.
Right now you
Joseph
also
Guillotine.
Dr. Joseph Guillotine. So always remember the name.
Blood spurts, and the man is no more. The guillotine, otherwise known as the national razor. The guillotine made its debut in 1791.
First guillotine was used in the year 1791.
As the new form of execution. The writings of Marat and others continued to call for the execution of anyone suspected of working against the revolution. For him, this included some members of the clergy and nobility who had previously benefited from the cruel system of inequality that existed before the revolution. In many parts of the countryside,
Okay, so students, right now you all saw this man who was in a bathtub. So this person, can anyone name What is the name of this person?
The clergy and nobility who had previously benefited.
So this person's name is Jean-Paul Marat. So इनके बारे में everyone do open page number 11 in NCERT, जहाँ पे Declaration of Rights of Man and Citizen दिया हुआ है. All of the students, please open page number 11 of NCERT, where the Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizen, all those rights are given.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
हाँ,
sir.
okay. So just beside जहाँ पे वो declaration के rights दिए हुए हैं, you will see there is another source box. Can you all see another source box? A photograph of a man is given.
Yes.
Yes. sir.
Yes. So that is Jean-Paul Marat. So Jean-Paul Marat, he was suffering from a rare skin condition. उनका कुछ अजीबोगरीब, he was suffering from a disease that he always used to get into a bathtub. He could never get out from a bathtub, and he was always in a bathtub filled with water. He was having some disease, but he was operating a newspaper. वो एक newspaper चला रहे थे. And the newspaper's name is given in your NCERT book. Can anyone read it? The name of that newspaper? Read the English one, not the French words.
The friend of the people.
What is the name? Arena said. Anyone else? Yashaswini or Sifat or anyone else? Akshat? What is the name of the newspaper with Jean-Paul Marat started in France?
Calamity people. Salami do people.
The friend of the people, isn't it? The friend of the people. So, इस newspaper में, Jean-Paul Marat instigated. His newspaper became very popular in France. फ्रांस में इनका न्यूज़पेपर बहुत ही फेमस बन गया. उस बाथटब में बैठ के लिखते थे न्यूज़पेपर के लिए. And he used to instigate the poor population of France against the rich population of France. वो हमेशा जो rich king, the nobility, the clergy, उनके खिलाफ हमेशा वो गरीबों को भड़काते थे through his writings. So उनके writing के through he started spreading fear in France that the rich people are going to take all your powers, the rich people are going to exploit you, the rich people are going to kill you, so you need to protest. So can any of the student read the entire paragraph what Jean-Paul Marat is saying in that source box? Who will read? Except Aryan. I know Aryan is ready. Atharv, can you read? Or Atul, Ishika, Prince, anyone? The source box which is given in the book, page number 11 of Jean-Paul Marat. Okay, it is here. I'm sharing the screen with you all. Can you all see it on the screen now? Source B?
Yes.
Okay. So now someone read quickly. Jaldi padho. Come on, students. It is on your screen. Read it, someone. Aryan Prasad, read it.
The revolutionary journalist Jean-Paul Marat commented in his newspaper La Ami du People on the constitution drafted by the National Assembly. The task of representing the people has been given to the rich. The lot of poor and oppressed will never be improved by the peaceful means alone. Here we have absolute proof of how wealth influences the law. Yet laws will last only as long as the people agree to obey them. And when they have managed to cast off the yoke of the aristocrats, they will do the same to the other owners of the wealth.
Okay, correct. So students, you all tell me that in the government of National Assembly, हम सभी ने पढ़ा, active passive citizen and all these things. In the government of National Assembly, political power was given to the poor, or it was in the hands of the rich people in society, especially the middle class. किसके हाथ में था political power?
Middle
In
class.
the others, in the hands of the rich, in the National Assembly, किसके हाथ में था?
So the middle class.
The middle class, that is in the hands of the rich. So देखो जीन पॉल माराट यहाँ पे क्या बोल रहे हैं? The task of representing the people has been given to the rich. लोगों को represent करने का task, if you all remember बच्चों, the members of the electors and the members of the National Assembly were those who paid the highest amount of taxes. अब लोगों को जो represent कर रहे हैं, the representation rights were given to the rich. The lot of the poor and the oppressed will never be improved by peaceful means alone. वो लोगों को क्या समझाने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं कि गरीबों की हालत पीसफुल तरीके से सुधरने नहीं वाली है. The poor people of France, if they will continue peaceful protest, peaceful demonstrations, peaceful debates, उससे उनके हालत में कोई सुधार नहीं होने वाला है. What is kind of saying is that poor people will have to fight for their rights. उनको लड़ के अपने rights को लेना पड़ेगा. So he's instigating the poor people to fight for their rights. Here we have absolute proof of how wealth influences the law. वो क्या क्या बोल रहे हैं कि यहाँ पे हमको पूरा सबूत मिल रहा है in the government of National Assembly ये कैसे पैसा laws को influence करता है. How money influences law in a country. So do you all think that it happens sometimes in India also, that rich people influence law making and other systems, our other government systems in India? Does it happens in India sometimes?
Yes.
What are the views of others? That does
Sir.
wealth influences law? I got the answer of Aryan and Devangi. What about others? Arshpreet को क्या लगता है? Arshpreet, do you think that in our country also many times wealthy people influence law in our country? Arshpreet? Okay, yes, it happens. It happens in our country also. It happens sometimes, but yet laws will last only as long as the people agree to obey them. मतलब मान लो हमने स्कूल में कुछ laws बनाए. There are definitely some rules, laws and regulations when you all come to school, but suddenly every student start revolting in school. No one is obeying any law. So then will those laws and regulations work if none of the students follow those rules and regulations?
No, sir.
No, sir.
It will not happen. It will not happen. Correct. So do you all remember last year you all have studied about non-cooperation movement of Mahatma Gandhi in the last chapter of history?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Second
sir.
last chapter. Yes. So Mahatma Gandhi ने क्या कहा था कि the British are ruling over India because Indians are following their rules and regulations. Because Indians are cooperating with the British. British India पे इसीलिए राज कर पा रहे हैं क्योंकि हम इंडियंस उनके रूल्स एंड रेगुलेशंस को मान रहे हैं, हम इंडियंस उनके बातों को सुनते हैं. अगर हम सारे के सारे इंडियंस वी स्टार्ट non cooperating with the British, if we do not listen to the rules and regulations made by them, if we disobey the British, then कब तक British हम पे रूल करेंगे? So it is kind of like that. So see, Jean-Paul Marat is kind of, but Gandhiji never advocated violent means. But Jean-Paul Marat क्या बोल रहे हैं to the poor people that you should use violence, you should fight for your rights, you should take your rights from the rich people of France, and you should stop obeying all the rules and regulations which are made by the rich people. So Jean-Paul Marat was a very influential, writer in France, and later he was killed. उन्होंने इतने भड़काऊ statements लिखे that it created a lot of violence in France, and later he was killed. So let us see next what happened. Can you all see the video again, a part of it?
Yes.
Okay, so देखो आगे क्या हो रहा है. What happens next?
Razor. The guillotine made its debut in 1791 as the new form of execution. The writings of Marat and others continued to call for the execution of anyone suspected of working against the revolution. For him, this included some members of the clergy and nobility who had previously benefited from the cruel system of inequality that existed before the revolution. In many parts of the countryside, local lords had found themselves become a target. Sire, the peasants, they're revolting. Oh, come on, that's a bit harsh. Sure, they smell a bit, but I wouldn't say they're revolting. Oh, yes, I see what you mean. Increasingly, these French aristocrats began fleeing France to find solitude in other parts of Europe. And once again, fear began to take hold. The privileged classes of these foreign nations didn't like what they were seeing because they feared revolutionary ideas may spread to their own lands.
So I had told you before when we were reading French Revolution that France was surrounded by countries where kings and queens were ruling. Do you all remember? And they were fearing that the ideas of French Revolution will spread to their countries और उनके देश में भी revolution शुरू हो सकता है. You all remember this point?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, and because of that, obviously Austria जो था वो फ्रांस का supporter था because Austria was the ससुराल of King Louis XVI. So Austria and Prussia, they were planning to attack on France. But before they could attack on France, National Assembly voted that France should attack the enemies first, and that happened.
The National Assembly, actually now the Legislative Assembly, feared that these nations may decide to attack. Then why don't we attack them first? No, you idiots, we are definitely not ready for war yet. Did somebody say something? France declared war on Austria in April 1792 and immediately got pummeled. It also didn't help that Austria's ally, Prussia, joined in the fighting. The Prussian Duke of Brunswick posted a letter warning the revolutionaries that if anything happened to the king, he would burn Paris to the ground. The Duke's letter proved to be a massive success.
पर्शिया के ड्यूक ने एक लेटर लिखा. The Persian Duke wrote a letter to the people of France that if anything happens to King Louis XVI, he is going to burn down Paris. वो पेरिस को जला देंगे. And can you all tell me that क्या ये धमकी काम किया? Did this kind of a warning worked for Louis XVI, or it worked in a opposite way?
Sorry, in opposite manner.
It worked in an opposite manner. People became very angry because of this threat from the Duke of Persia, and they at last killed Louis XVI.
In inspiring the people of Paris to do the exact opposite of what he intended. They were enraged by the threat, and on the 10th of August 1792, the tension in the city exploded, and a mob stormed the king's palace. Fighting broke out between the revolutionaries and the king's Swiss guard, with casualties in the hundreds. King Louis fled and took refuge in the chamber of the Legislative Assembly, where Robespierre and his radical Jacobins were gaining ever more power. Given the developing situation, the chamber decided to hold a vote, and in what some considered to be a second revolution, it was decided to suspend the monarchy entirely.
So see, this is now the rule of the convention. The Legislative Assembly में एक voting हुआ. In Legislative Assembly there was a vote, और सिर्फ एक vote से सिर्फ एक vote ज़्यादा हो गया, which decided King Louis' fate. Because of just one single vote, one extra vote, King Louis XVI was executed and France was declared as a republic.
King Louis XVI was now just plain old Louis, and he was sent to a prison cell where an eye could be kept on him. A month later, the newly established National Convention officially declared the French Republic, and society underwent a massive change. Enlightened ideas of democracy and equality were being implemented, but very quickly, these ideas seemed to become secondary to fear, paranoia, and a thirst for blood. The new republic began working to violently remove any semblance of the old royalist regime. The church became a prime target.
Students, now here, can you tell me which period is this right now, which is being right now shown? ये कौन सा period है of France?
Reign of Terror.
Okay, others also agree with?
Yes, sir.
It is the Reign of Terror. Correct.
Yes,
So Reign of Terror में क्या हुआ? Though France was said to be a republic, though France को एक republic कहा जा रहा था, and republic means democracy, liberty, freedom of speech, freedom of expression, and all these things. But actually, France under Robespierre, under the convention, was exact opposite. Severe control, severe punishment, and जो भी राजा महाराजा के रूल के समय के जितने भी symbols थे, all the symbols of the power of the monarch, of the power of the king, or the rule of the king, उसको वो लोग मिटाने लगे. They started, they totally confiscated all church properties. सारे church के properties को उन्होंने ले लिया. They took all the church buildings, and Robespierre even created his own religion. Robespierre during Reign of Terror, this is not given in your NCERT, so you should just know about it. He created his own religion. He was very much against Christianity. So let us see.
Those who refused to take an oath to the revolution were deported or arrested. A new state-sponsored atheistic religion named the Cult of Reason was created as a replacement for the Catholic Church. Notre Dame, along with many other churches, had their religious treasures destroyed and were converted to temples of reason. Even the Christian calendar didn't survive, as a brand new revolutionary.
So see, even the Christian calendar, which today we even follow, even that was changed and a new calendar was introduced. Can you all see the changes in the new calendar?
Yes.
Totally new. 100 seconds per minute, 100 minutes per day, 10 hours a day, and an entire new set of months. ये January, February ये खत्म हो गया, and you know Thermidor and some other kinds of months were introduced.
Calendar was soon introduced. Hey, honey, I'm home. Yeah, whatever, jerk. Whoa, what's wrong with you? You forgot. Forgot what? Everything. This entire year. My birthday was on the 3rd of Germinal, our anniversary was the 12th of Thermidor, and you promised that in Freimaer, we'd go on a romantic weekend trip to Venice. No, I said we'd do that in December. December hasn't been a thing for years. The government of Paris, now under the control of the radical sans-culottes, began rounding up suspected enemies of the revolution.
You all remember the sans-culottes couple you all have seen in the PPT, who used to wear the striped clothes?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yes. So you know Jacobin Club के अंदर all these sans-culottes people, they started arresting any people whom they used to feel they are a threat to France. So Reign of Terror के दौरान what happened, that any person who was considered as enemy of the republic, even by suspicion, अगर कोई if anyone is criticizing the government just in the talks, they were arrested. If someone was supporting king's rule, they were arrested. If someone was not following any rule, they were arrested, and most of the people were even killed. They were sent to the guillotine
and sending them to prison in the thousands. Naturally, a large number of those arrested were members of the clergy and aristocracy. As France's foreign enemies continued to close in, panic spread. Georges Danton made impassioned calls for men to defend the Republic, and tens of thousands of troops left Paris for the front lines. However, in their absence, Paris was left to its own devices. As enemy troops arrived in Verdun, the people of Paris feared that their crowded prisons were becoming a breeding ground for counter-revolutionary conspiracy.
Okay, so here what is being shown is कि France Paris के jails में बहुत सारे clergymen in the jail of Paris, many clergymen and many people from the aristocracy, from the nobility, they were in the prisons. So while the military was in the borders of France fighting, people in Paris started fearing. क्या आप बोल सकते हो कि वो क्या fear करना शुरू कर दिए? Any idea? Most of the clergymen and nobility people were in the jails. So क्या हो सकता था उनके दिमाग में, क्या आया होगा? That what could happen inside jail?
They could start a revolution against the government.
Very correct. They can start conspiring against the Republic of France. लोगों को ये डर लगने लगा कि पेरिस में इतने सारे जो नोबिलिटी और क्लर्जीमैन जो जेल में भरे हुए हैं, वो जेल के अंदर बैठे बैठे आपस में दे कैन स्टार्ट प्लानिंग, एंड इफ द फ्रेंच एनिमी लूजेस, अगर फ्रांस इफ इट लूजेस वॉर फ्रॉम अदर कंट्रीज, और अगर दूसरे कंट्रीज के सोल्जर अगर आ गए और इनको अगर निकाल दिया गया, then they can create more trouble for the French Republic. So what happened, एक दिन was all the people of Paris, they all went to these jails and they started killing all these people.
What would happen if the Prussians reached Paris and freed the aristocrats? Marat believed he knew what would happen. The aristocrats would enact their vengeance on the people. Fearing those they had already imprisoned, mobs descended on Paris's prisons. They broke in, and during the brutal September massacres, aristocrats, priests, and others were tried and executed on the spot. Even women and children weren't spared. With over 1,600 victims, word of the massacre spread across Europe. One British newspaper wondered, are these the rights of man? Is this the liberty of human nature? But there was still one man in particular that Robespierre and his radicals really wanted to see executed. Austria and Prussia pledged that after they defeated France, they'd return King Louis to the throne.
ऑस्ट्रिया एंड प्रशिया उन्होंने ये प्लेज लिया था, दे हैड टेकन अ प्लेज, बोथ ऑस्ट्रिया एंड प्रशिया, दैट इफ दे विल डिफीट the French Republic, if they will defeat the revolutionary government of the convention, then they will again make Louis XVI the king. But Robespierre said, okay, राजा को तो आप तभी ना राजा बना सकते हो, you can make Louis XVI the king only if he is alive. And they took the decision of killing Louis XVI.
Well, checkmate Austrian Prussia, because you can't return a man to the throne if he's already dead. Citizen Louis Capet was put on trial for treason. Obviously, he was found guilty, but his punishment was less certain. Many moderates wanted to simply deport him, but Robespierre insisted the revolution could only live if the king was dead.
See, moderates wanted that the king should be thrown out of France. उसको फ्रांस से बाहर निकाल दो. But the radicals, that is under Maximilian Robespierre, they wanted that the king should be killed. So students, what do you all think? राजा को मार देना ज्यादा सही था और राजा को फ्रांस से बाहर निकाल देना बेटर डिसीजन होता? What do you all feel? In French Revolution, according to your thinking, killing of king by Robespierre and the government was a better thing to do, or it would have been better to throw him out from France?
Sir, killing would be a better option.
Why, Devangi? What was the harm of throwing him out from France, sending him to another country?
So he might get support of many people from outside and do a revolt in France.
Correct. So that was the main fear of Robespierre, and that is why king was executed.
A vote was held, and by just one vote, Louis was sentenced to the guillotine. If you don't mind, I'd like to say a few words first. Gentlemen, I am innocent of everything of which I am accused. Wait, you're too loud. They can't hear me. Hang on, I haven't finished yet. Wait, dude. Uncool. In her prison cell, Marie Antoinette heard the guns fire, signaling her husband's death. Before long, she would meet the same fate. Back on the war front, France defied all expectations and actually managed to push the enemy back. But then more countries joined the coalition against France, and it all went to pot again. What do? Conscript the masses. The National Convention introduced a conscription law, with each regional department having to meet a certain quota of men for the army. However,
so what is this conscription law, students? That is the convention एक conscription law pass किया. According to the conscription law, from all districts of France, from each districts of France, a total number of men will have to participate in the army. मान लो कि इंडिया में अचानक कंस्क्रिप्शन लॉ लागू कर दिया जाता है, तो हो जाएगा कि हर डिस्ट्रिक्ट से मान लो फ्रॉम ईच डिस्ट्रिक्ट 50,000 men will have to participate in army, will have to go into army. That kind of thing was done in France. Do you think suddenly अगर इस तरह का चीज इंडिया में हो जाए or in any country, people will be happy? Forced, if people are forced to join the army?
No, sir.
No, definitely not. I know maybe there are some of the boys and some of the girls in this class also who may want to join the army, but it depends on your own liking. लेकिन अगर आपको जबरदस्ती किया जाए, then that will not be helpful.
Not everyone was happy with this new law. You see, while Paris was definitely a hotbed for radical revolutionary fervor, some of the regions outside of Paris weren't quite so keen on the revolution. Some were largely still conservative, still supported the church, and just didn't suffer from that much inequality before the revolution. So as the revolution turned increasingly violent and anti-Christian, many were outraged. Now they were being conscripted to fight for the new republic they hated. That was the last straw. Counter-revolutionary uprisings erupted in a number of regions across France.
What happened, students? Many people in France were not happy by Robespierre's rule, as we all know. And Robespierre का जो government था, it was very anti-Christian. वो Christian धर्म के बहुत खिलाफ था. And most of the people in France were very devout Catholics. Maximum लोग जो थे वो बहुत ही वो Catholic धर्म को बहुत ही निष्ठा से वो they were practicing it. So and उसके ऊपर ये forced army में join करना. Because of that, in many parts of France, counter-revolutionary movement started. Revolution के खिलाफ लोगों ने movement करना शुरू कर दिया in France.
Some would last for years, such as in the Northwest, where a large-scale uprising was led by the Owls. Why were they called the Owls? Because their leader was named Jean Owl. Why was he called Jean Owl? Possibly because he could do a really good impression of an owl. Really? That's what we're going with? Owls? Just because this guy can do an impression of one? Hit him with it, Jean. Hoot, hoot. Yeah, okay, that's pretty good. The Schweineri Uprising lasted all the way until 1800. In the summer of 1793, the southern city of Toulon invited the British Navy over for some tea and crumpets. And then they asked if they'd possibly like to stay and occupy the city. Being an important naval base, this was a heavy blow to the Republic, who sent a relatively unknown young...
So can you all right now see the map of France on the screen?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Okay, so see
Yes,
in the
sir.
south, in the southern part of south, you all can see कि वहाँ पे कुछ British आए, some British came in the southern part of south, and there उन लोगों ने occupy कर लिया. They occupied that part of France. So you know it was very bad for France. So it was during this time when Napoleon Bonaparte came into scene. Napoleon Bonaparte was a normal military commander, and under Napoleon Bonaparte they attacked this part of France which was occupied by the British, and Napoleon Bonaparte was successful in getting this part back for the France. He defeated the British and got that part back from the British. So from here, Napoleon Bonaparte kind of became like a local hero for France.
captain by the name of Napoleon Bonaparte to help stage the siege of the city. Toulon was recaptured by France in the winter, and for his service, Napoleon was promoted to the rank of brigadier general. The most infamous counter-revolution, however, occurred in the Vendée region. Throughout 17, Carrier committed brutal, economy getting worse. It seemed that women and children Carrier would later going badly, revolts in the provinces, and the economy getting worse. It seemed the government just wasn't doing a very good job. Radicals' fear for the safety of the revolution intensified, and Marat even began calling for the moderates in the government to be executed.
देखो मिराट अपने राइटिंग में ये बोलने लगे कि the moderates in the government should also be killed. So Mirat was a very influential person in instigating violence in France.
In return, the moderates called for the arrest of Marat. This led to a chain of events with the two sides in heated conflict. Robespierre declared the Jacobins to be an insurrection and called on the people to arm themselves. It all ended on the 31st of May 1793 with the National Convention surrounded by radical sans-culottes and 29 moderate Girondin politicians arrested. From this moment on, the moderates ceased to be a political force. Robespierre and his radicals would be in almost total control.
What happened, students? Moderates को radicals ने साफ कर दिया. The moderates were arrested. The moderates were sent to the guillotine. And from now on, after the killing of all the moderates in the French government, now there was overall rule of the radicals.
Of the government. And this brings us to the story of a woman named Charlotte Corday. Charlotte lived in the northwest city of Caen, and like many in the area, was horrified at the rapid radicalization and increasing violence of the revolution. And the man she blamed more than anyone was Jean-Paul Marat. She wanted to bring peace back to France, and so she did something drastic. She traveled to Paris and told Marat she had a list of enemies for him to publish in his paper. Marat eagerly invited her in for a meeting. So where's that list of enemies you promised me? Here it is. Wait a minute. This isn't a list of enemies. It just says, yippee-ki-yay, mother... And just like that, Marat was no more.
Students, can you all see this painting on your screen?
Yes, sir.
See, this is
Yes.
the real painting. This is the real painting of Jean-Paul Marat, which was later drawn. Here you all can see, if you see it properly, you can see the blood coming out from his chest, and he's having a pen, kind of a pen and ink, and he was writing something, and like that, Jean-Paul Marat was killed by a woman.
Charlotte was quickly arrested and sent to the guillotine. Her dream of restoring peace, however, died with her. Marat became a martyr. In temples of reason, symbols of the dead Marat became the new crucifix. In death, he became an even more powerful inspiration for the extreme levels of violence that were about to rip throughout the new republic. That's right. Here comes the reign of terror. If you thought this revolution already violent, well, you ain't seen nothing yet, son. The radicals were now in control, and they believed not only was France surrounded by foreign enemies, but that within the mass axis, there were also plenty of...
So during the reign of terror, France बाहर के दुश्मनों से तो घिरा ही हुआ था, all other foreign countries were enemies of France, and even there were many who were against the government of the convention. So any person in France who was suspected that this person can be dangerous for the republic, they were arrested and killed.
Robespierre and the rest of the radical faction were having none of it. A new committee of public safety was established with 12 members. Its purpose was to protect the new French Republic from its enemies, and it basically became a 12.
So, students, can you all right now see Committee of Public Safety on your screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Sir.
So everyone, please do write it in your book, Committee of Public Safety. So during the reign of terror, it is not given in your book. Two kind of institutions were formed. One was Committee of Public Safety. उसमें 12 members थे, and the head was Maximilian Robespierre. He was kind of like a dictator. Another was the Revolutionary Tribunal. It will be shown here. So Committee of Public Safety, what he used to do? Committee of Public Safety ने बहुत सारे spies को इकट्ठा किया, that is जासूस. Thousands and thousands of spies were spread all over France. पूरे France में जासूसों को government, all these spies were spread. And they always used to keep a strict watch on people's lives. लोग क्या कर रहे हैं, लोग क्या बातें कर रहे हैं, what they are discussing, what they are reading, what they are writing. On all the matters of people's life, these spies were always having an eye. एक बात ये था. And they also had policemen. किसी को भी अगर लगता था कि this person is suspicious, उसको arrest कर लो. And उसके बाद Revolutionary Tribunal was like a court. It was a court of justice. So arrest करने के बाद Revolutionary Tribunal भेजो. Most of the people were found guilty in the Revolutionary Tribunal and they were sent to the guillotine.
Man dictatorship with Robespierre as its leading voice. The Revolutionary Tribunal was also reinstated. A special court created to streamline the process of trying suspected enemies and handing out their death sentences. With these two new...
So see, these are the two new, they were also called, the weapons of the reign of terror. One was Committee of Public Safety, another was the Revolutionary Tribunal.
New institutions, Robespierre wanted to scare France's enemies straight. In September 1793, it was announced that terror would be the order of the day. In other words, fear had become official government policy.
Fear and terror, it became the official government policy of France. Convention के अंदर क्या हुआ? लोगों को डरा के रखना, लोगों को कंट्रोल करके रखना, and लोगों को मारना. It became the official policy of France, how to control people.
And from then onwards, we enter into the period known as the Reign of Terror. Spies and secret police were everywhere and watched the people closely. France's public had to be extremely careful what they said and how they behaved. Obviously, criticizing this new system, or the government, would quickly have you sent off to the guillotine. But that's not all. Even the most minor offense could have you tried before the Revolutionary Tribunal. Hello, Citizen Martin. Hello, Monsieur Dubois. Monsieur? Did I just hear you say Monsieur?
Okay. Another big change. What came under reign of terror? Can anyone tell me, in France, जैसे हम लोग श्रीमान, श्रीमती इन सब का use करते हैं. What was the word in France which was used for, men and women? For respectable word? Correct, monsieur and madam. And what was the word which the government introduced?
Citoyen and citoyenne.
Correct, citoyen and citoyenne. That is citizens. So अगर कोई मान लो, it was reality. In reality, it happened. If someone even called someone monsieur, that person was sent to the guillotine. It was kind of like that. So that is being shown.
That's the old style of address, my friend. To the guillotine. You know what? I didn't like him, but I do feel kind of bad for the king and his family. Oof, expressing sympathy for the royal family, are we? To the guillotine. 12 sous for a loaf of bread? That's way overpriced. To the guillotine. Man, this bread line is taking forever. To the guillotine. And you look like you're thinking anti-revolutionary thoughts. To the guillotine. Max, we're sending way too many people to the guillotine. To the guillotine!
Happened, बच्चों, that, Robespierre kind of became like a madman. वो psycho बन गया था. Robespierre became a psycho. And, even if Robespierre's own supporters, Robespierre's own members of his own political party, his friends, अगर कुछ कोई, suggest भी करता था, if someone even suggested some changes in Robespierre's government, even that person was also killed. So students, what do you think? If some person starts acting like Robespierre, won't he accumulate a huge number of enemies around him?
Yes.
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 That is what only happened.
Chop, 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 chop. It was insane. All across France, about 40,000 people were killed for suspected crimes against liberty. Let's say your neighbor won't stop mowing the lawn at 7 in the morning. Well, then all you gotta do is tell the government they've been talking smack about the revolution, and there's a good chance they'll end up in front of the Revolutionary Tribunal. Maybe they'll even be executed, taking a metaphorical load off your shoulders and a literal one off theirs. The most prominent victim of the Reign of Terror was a certain Marie Antoinette, who was finally tried and found guilty of treason in 1793. She expected she'd be brought to the guillotine in a royal carriage, fit for a queen. All the Republic could provide for her, however, was a wooden tumbril. At 37 years old, the most hated woman in French history met her end on the 16th of October, 1793.
So Queen Marie Antoinette was killed on 16th of October 1793.
Robespierre had saved the revolution through terror. Internal dissent was being suppressed. The food situation was no longer quite as bad. Even the French military had got its act together again and pummeled the Allies at the Battle of Fleurus. For Danton and his followers, the time was right to try to normalize the French Republic. Hey Robespierre, so we were thinking that since things are finally going better, maybe we should rein in the terror. And while we're on it, we could possibly start taking it easier on the church. And also try to end this costly war. Oh, crap. As time went on...
So here, right now, what it showed that there were some supporters of Robespierre like Desmoulins and some else. वो जब Robespierre को कुछ suggest करने गए तो Robespierre ने उनको भी मरवा डाला.
Robespierre seemed to go, for lack of a better term, a bit mental. He was hell-bent on creating what he called a republic of virtue, and for him, this meant amping up the bloodshed even more. Throughout the spring and summer of 1794, executions reached an unprecedented level during a period known as the Great Terror. Even those closest to him found their way to the guillotine if they dared oppose his ideas and actions, and he began alienating himself from the rest of the convention. He created a new deistic religion called the Cult of the Supreme Being, along with the new annual Festival of the Supreme Being.
He even created his own religion. Robespierre खुद को इतना महान समझने लगा कि उसने खुद का धर्म बना लिया.
And I think Robespierre is really starting to lose it. He thinks he's a god or something. Nonsense. Sure, he's gone a little extreme, but he doesn't think he's a god. My children, bathe your immortal souls in the virtue of my republic. Okay, yeah, he's completely lost it. Robespierre's ultimate mistake, however, came on July 26th, when he made a speech to the National Convention, in which he said this: I have in my hand a brand new list of enemies to be sent to the guillotine, and many of you are on this list, but I'm not going to tell you who yet. What do you think of that? I think we should send Robespierre to the guillotine first. All in favor? No. 2 days later, Robespierre became the final victim of the monstrous terror and paranoia he had created. Many historical accounts of the revolution end here with the death of Robespierre and his terror, but the revolution officially continued for another 5 years.
Last, Robespierre was killed. So the revolution started, as you all can see the timeline, from the storming of the Bastille in 1789. Then, in the middle, National Assembly's government was formed. After that, Robespierre took power in his own hands. The government of convention happened, and at last Robespierre was killed. लेकिन revolution 1799 तक चला. So इसके बाद the government of directory was formed.
Until 1799. So what happened between now and then? Well, after the fall of Robespierre, a more moderate political group called the Thermidorians took control of the convention.
Okay, so this is important. This term is not given in your book. That is the directory, the rule of directory, which was made by the middle class people. National Assembly, it was made by the middle class, rich middle class. और उनसे Robespierre ने छीना था. As soon as Robespierre got killed, the convention's government got over. फिर से the rich middle class people took power in their own hands, and they were known as the Thermidorians.
They wanted to restore stability to the government. Now, Robespierre's allies and other radicals who had fueled the terror themselves became the target of political suppression. Bourgeois street fighters took on the radical sans-culottes in the streets during a period named the White Terror. In 1795, the Thermidorians drafted a new constitution and created a government called the Directory, with the purpose of preventing power from being able to fall into the hands of a single individual again. As this new government was being established, royalists who wanted to bring the monarchy back to France saw this moment as an opportunity to strike. They staged an insurrection in Paris and battled with the National Guard in the streets. Luckily, one Napoleon Bonaparte happened to be in Paris at the time, and he took control of the situation, firing on the crowd and putting down the insurrection. From this moment on, the people of Paris would never again be able to stage a popular uprising and lost their control over the revolution. For his actions, Napoleon became a general and was sent to take control of the French armies in Italy. The new Directory remained a fairly ineffective government for the remainder of the revolution. It was plagued with corruption and struggled to keep the economy afloat, and as a result, wasn't very popular. For the people of France, with the strict social customs of both royalist France and the terror gone, they didn't really know what to do with themselves. Men no longer removed their hats when talking to women. Different classes began intermingling, and a publication began circulating that looked a lot like a modern dating app. It was social anarchy. Outside of France, the war continued. In 1795, France took the Netherlands, where they set up a puppet state. Then they negotiated both Prussia and Spain out of the war. The British attempted to land French royalists in the west to reinforce rebellion, but that plan failed. In 1796, the French planned a three-pronged attack with the aim of marching on Vienna and knocking Austria out of the war. The two northern armies were defeated and forced to retreat. However, Napoleon in the south, with groundbreaking military strategy, won battle after battle after battle. He pushed the Austrians out of Italy and began closing in on Vienna. The Austrians freaked out, and Napoleon oversaw the signing of a peace treaty. He had almost single-handedly knocked Austria out of the war, and by the way, he was only 28, so maybe it's about time you moved out of your mom's basement. Napoleon became a famed hero among the French people, but his aspirations were still higher. He briefly went off to Egypt and discovered a bunch of gnarly Egyptian stuff, but then the British destroyed his fleet and trapped his forces. Say, Napoleon, sir, you're not going to leave us here stuck in Egypt and return to France, are you? Nonsense, my boy. I would never dream of abandoning my loyal soldiers. Wow, what's that over there? On his return to Paris, Napoleon found himself to be extremely popular, and the government extremely unpopular, and he started getting some power-hungry ideas. Conveniently, a politician named Emmanuel Joseph Sieyès approached Napoleon and said, "Hey man, since you're so popular, do you want to help me stage a coup?" "Great idea. Let's stage a coup, and then I'll coup you." What? Napoleon, with the help of his politician brother, entered the government chamber, possibly got punched in the face, and finally his troops intimidated the council to dissolve the government and create a new constitution that basically made Napoleon a dictator. So there you have it.
Okay. So, students, I know it was a long class for you all, but today we saw this video. Did you all see about Napoleon? Whoever was present in class?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So we will discuss in our next class in detail how Napoleon took power. Today I will, send you this video. So again, take time and see this video again, especially the Napoleon's part. So Napoleon was a quite a big local hero in France, and taking the government of Directory was very unstable. And taking the advantage of this instability, Napoleon Bonaparte became first, he became the dictator of France, and then he became the king of France. And like that, the French Revolution came to an end. Okay, chalo. Thank you everyone for joining the class. I know it was a long class, but most of it was a video. So see you all in the next class. Okay, Jai Hind everyone. Thank you.
Jai Hind.
Jai Hind.
Jains.